Now, usually when you do like a controlled purchase, you go in there, you buy the drugs, and you get the fuck out, right?
Right.
In and out. No, not me.
Hey guys, it's Donnie here, and I just want to let you know that we've recently launched a content development company, and this company helps people get social content. You know you need to put out a lot of content nowadays to get engagement out there in all your social platforms. Well, we've come up with a really cool way to help you get videos, blog posts, memes, social posters, and infographics for whatever social site you need. So check us out at successchamps.us and learn more about how you can get social content for your social media.
Support for this podcast comes from Point Blank Safety Services and Blue Family Fund. Blue Family Fund, helping dependents of law enforcement families on their journeys. Blue Family Fund is a nonprofit that raises funds and offers financial support through higher education scholarships for dependents of law enforcement officers and by providing financial assistance for families of fallen law enforcement officers. Every dollar donated will go to the families of police officers, either through scholarships to dependents of police officers or as aid to fallen officers' families. Visit us at bluefamilyfund.com.
You're listening to Donnie Success Champions, where I believe everybody is on a journey. Life is all about the stories you can tell and teach later. You're going to hear the stories of people who have overcome hardships, failures in life to find success along their journey. All right, guys, going to be another cool episode. I'm bringing Brandyn Cox on here to talk about his journey going from Army MP to corporate accountant. It's a fun episode, guys. Enjoy this one. All right, guys, going to be another cool episode. I'm your host, Donnie Boivin, and I'm bringing in my buddy, Brandyn Cox, and we're going to do everything in our power to make accounting not boring and suck for you today. So he's an Army vet, so I'll try not to beat up on him too much about that, but we'll give it a go. Brandyn, welcome to the show, my brother. Please share with us your story.
Thank you. Yeah, as Donnie mentioned, I was in the Army. I went in 2007, right after I graduated high school. I went to the MEPS program pretty much about a month or two after I graduated. I went to Fort Leonard Wood for basic. I was a military police officer. I did 6 years active duty, one tour in Afghanistan in 2010 to 2011. That was when Obama had made a big push for 30,000 extra troops within like a month to go to Afghanistan. That was me. Interestingly enough, I was actually in Germany overseas, my first duty station, when I found out I was going to 10th Mountain Division in Fort Drum. And they were like, yeah, you're going to be going to Fort Drum, and as soon as you get there, you're going to play catch-up to go to Iraq. I was like, all right, great. So I get there, and I'm like, why is my whole unit here? When I get picked up, they're like, oh, yeah, orders got canceled. We leave in 2 days or 2 weeks for Afghanistan. Shit, none of my household goods are here. I'm still waiting to get all that stuff, so I had to get double issued all my CIF gear, all my stuff to go back over to Afghanistan.
Did you have to re-inventory all that stuff?
Yes.
Oh, dude, that's the worst.
Yeah. The worst part about this whole thing, so, and I don't know if you've ever been to Germany, but Germany gets pretty cold over there. It's pretty far north, and it's a great place. I miss Germany. That was a great place to be. But going to Fort Drum and then getting ready to go to Afghanistan, I was full of a unit that had been deployed several times. These guys had been with each other on multiple deployments for the most part. I'm the new guy who had not deployed. So I knew nothing going into this. And I was working garrison. I was an MP working the road for the first 2 years anyway. So I had no real tactical training that was at least relevant since basic training.
Yeah, I mean, so your job was to stand at a gate, and our job was to convince you we hadn't drank that much and we're trying to get back on base.
There you go.
Fair enough.
We get out. We go to Afghanistan, and it's March time, so it's not too bad. Get used to the weather, and then comes fall season. Well, nobody freaking told me Afghanistan gets cold and it snows. I had no idea about this. So all that cold weather gear that was on its way from Germany that never got to me, never got to Afghanistan either. So I found out Afghanistan was cold. Anyway, shooting forward. So I come back from deployment. I stayed at Fort Drum for the next 3 years. I worked actually on the CID team. For you, it's NCIS. I did the undercover drug team for the last 2 years, which was a trip, man. I tell you, being able to buy a bunch of weed and cocaine and pills on the government's dime, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, dude, I had a buddy go through NCIS, and I didn't know he went full. I think it's called NRC, which is the narc division, I believe. And I saw him out in town one time. I mean, this was months. He kind of just fall, and he's got a full beard and long hair, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Did you get thrown out? And he turns me, slams me into the wall. He's like, shut the hell up, you know. But yeah, totally full undercover. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah, we that's exactly what we did. I mean, we were able to wear like beards for the most part until forget what our actual unit number was, because I was an attachment to them. I wasn't actually a CID special agent. I was like, what they did is they pulled people, different MPs from different brigades, and was like, here, now you're on the drug team with CID, so you're going to work with them. So I want to say they're like the 15th or something, but until headquarters ever came down, then we had to shave for like the one day they came down. But otherwise, we wore beards, wore jeans.
Well, I got to bust your chops a little bit. You're not a big dude. I mean, sitting here looking at you, you're like the IT guy.
Yeah, I've never been known as like a big brute.
and they're putting you into an undercover role to sell drugs.
Yeah, it was funny. Actually, my first time doing it was probably the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done in my life. Because when I go in there, now usually when you do like a controlled purchase, you go in there, you buy the drugs, and you get the fuck out, right?
Right.
In and out. No, not me. What do? I talk to the guy. I spend like 45 minutes in this dude's house. My team chief is a warrant officer. He is sitting there freaking out because they got a live wire on me the whole time. They can hear everything that's going on. I'm sitting there trying to get like extra drugs. I'm trying to find out where all this extra stuff is, how I can get heroin. And these guys, I know these guys are sitting there just sweating in their boots in the cars waiting for me. Like, dude, you need to get the fuck out of there. But yeah.
So you're in there trying to make a friend and a buddy, and everybody's like, dude, just bust the guy already.
Yeah. Well, the guy gave me this thing that goes in like the cup holder in your car that holds change. And he was like, yeah, I stole that. That's for you now. So yeah, it was really interesting.
Tell me you stuck that in your pocket and you still have it to this day.
I wish I did, but they had to take that as evidence. I was really. What was awesome too is when after we did a couple control buys with the guy, he ended up going to jail and we had to go to court. But that piece of evidence, when it came up, was really entertaining. I thought when they're like, they're talking to this guy like, hey, can you explain why you handed out this cup change holder to an undercover officer? It was pretty interesting. He had explained
so you would expect, guns, knives, maybe explosive device. No, you get a change cup holder that goes in your car. You're a badass, dude. Just straight up badass. So, yeah, I mean, if anything else fails, if he did attack you, I guess you could throw it at him. I mean,
yeah, right. And the worst part about these, you don't get to carry your firearm with you either.
Right.
You don't have nothing, so the whole time I'm just like, oh man, I really hope he buys all this shit, but he did. So that was nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So I get out of the Army in 2013, and I get out. I'm married at this time because I got married right after Afghanistan. Me and my wife got married then. So at the time we had been married about 2.5, 3 years. I get out in August 2013, and I'm looking for a job, and the only thing I can find is working at this place called ABC Warehouse. It's just like a department appliance store. Horrible job. I'll tell you, they would try, those high-tech washers and dryers that have like the LG smartphone apps and shit on them?
Yeah.
They would like try to get you to sell that to some old lady who has no idea do what a cell phone is. It's terrible. I'm like, man, I can't do this. This poor lady doesn't need a $2,000 washer. So I quit there after about 2 weeks. And then I started working in loss prevention over at Macy's. And that job was boring as shit. It was literally just watching CCTVs all day long, looking for people to steal stuff that I didn't really care about because I was getting paid like $9 an hour to do this. I'm like, if somebody tries to stop and gets rowdy with me, just walk out the door.
Okay. So how do you keep this consistent theme of somebody looking at you and going, okay, that guy should be a narc? I mean, that guy should be like, that dude should bust people. How do you get that vibe in your life?
Well, I don't know. I mean, when you look at like Jet Li, man, he was small, but he was pretty mighty.
Jet Li also has like 20 bajillion black belts and can stand flat-footed and kick over your head.
Yeah, he's a little bit better than me, but so I worked that job for about a month, and this was actually my real first taste of what the world was going to be like post-military, getting out. I'd been working there for like a week maybe, and the manager for loss prevention was like, all right, we're going to go upstairs, we're going to go meet, I think her name was Stacy. He was like, she's like the department head for this branch or whatever of the Macy's. I said, all right, cool. So we'll go up there and talking to her. She's kind of getting to know me. And she's like, oh, I hear you're a vet. And I was like, yeah, I was in Afghanistan 2010, 2011. I did 6 years in the Army, so on and so forth. Talked for like 2 minutes about it. I'm not one of the guys I like to try and like talk about it a lot. I just let it be like, yeah, I'm a vet. All right, cool. We'll go on further. And she was like, well, I'm trying to think of how she phrased it. She's like, well, we're not going to have any problems with you having like PTSD or nothing, are we? I'm like,
now we are.
Yeah. Wow. I was like, man, it's just been like 2 weeks. Like, I got out in what was it, August 13th, 2013 was the actual ETS date. This was like August 20th. So it had been like 2 weeks, that I'd been out, and I'm already dealing with that. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that's just how it went. Everyone had thought, even, only years after the wars had all started, everybody had PTSD, and whether if they do or not, that they're all crazy as hell too.
Right. What'd you say to her
really
when you said that?
I really wish I had said something smart or did something, but actually I was kind of taken aback by it more than anything, because I did have some rough times downrange. I didn't, I got my combat action badge, but it was for being shot at a lot. So, I had my own issues, and I didn't want to have to talk to her about it.
There's a lot of times in life, though, where in the moment you're like so shocked that you can't come up with it. And I'm a smart-ass dude. I can usually come with some pretty good gunslinging back at people, verbally. Yeah. But there's been a couple times in my life that people have just completely caught me off guard. Like, it's so out of the blue that you freeze up for a moment. And I don't know if you're like me, but I've got a couple of those now in the chamber. I'm like, dude, let somebody say something stupid like that again, and watch how I respond,
Yep. Right. Yeah. Ever since then, that's exactly how it is. Like, I'm known, especially with like people that I work with and people I know, like I'm kind of like the smart ass. I'm good at coming back with stuff. Like, it's hard to come off me. So I know exactly what you mean. But yeah, that caught me so far off guard. I wasn't really sure what to do. So I ended up quitting there about a week later. I was like, yeah, if this is the atmosphere this place is like, I'm just going to get out of here. So I didn't really like the ethics and the morals of that place. I walked out of there. And unfortunately, I got into working at a gun store, which was a real good time. I loved working there. It's a place called Cleveland's. Just a family-owned firearms store. They sold long guns, handguns. They had a little indoor shooting range, too. And it was good. I actually got better shooting there than I ever did when I was in the Army, because I had shot every single day when I worked there versus, every few months you go out to the range and shoot 20 rounds. So I actually got pretty good at shooting. I ended up getting a couple firearms, buying a bunch of stuff. I had a good time. So I worked there for about 2 years. And then while I started going to Cleveland's, right at that time, I actually started going to school at University of Toledo. So I used my GI Bill, and I'm thinking, all right, I still want to be a cop, because that was why I went into the Army. I want to go be a police officer. That's what I'm going to do. And so I started studying criminal justice. Looking back at it now, that's just a really cool liberal arts degree, but at the time I didn't know. So I got all the way down to probably about my second year in school, and a lot of the problems with anxiety and the depression, the PTSD started coming up. And I knew that I wasn't going to be a cop, that wasn't probably going to be a good, suitable career for me anymore, considering the high-stress environment that was in. And especially because during the time when I was going to school for that and thinking about it, that's when a lot of the Trayvon Martin shooting happened, and a lot of the public image of police had really gone south after that. Mm-hmm. So I was like, the last thing I want to do is feel like I'm going back on deployment every day I go back to working as a police officer. I've already done that for my one time. I don't want to do that for the rest of my life if this is what it's going to turn out to be. So I took an accounting class, and actually they started talking about like balance sheets and income statements. I really enjoyed it, and let me take one more class. I did that. I never looked back. So I started studying accounting. I had actually one more class. I was all I needed to get my bachelor's in criminal justice. There's no point in finishing it up at this point. I'm not going to pay UT $400 for a class, I guess.
Right. Well, let me ask. So is the Ben Affleck movie The Accountant like your study guide for being an accountant now? I mean,
yeah, he wrote one of the textbooks. No, actually, I want to see. I had yet to see that movie. I heard it was.
It's the only movie where an accountant's a badass. Period.
Yeah, it's usually it because a lot of times they're a lot like Office Space.
Yes.
Where they're just sitting there like, hey, hello, company court, please hold, and they dial you out to somebody else. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it can be kind of boring.
Yeah. So you're going through the college route, realize things are getting a little hectic in the mental game, which happens to everybody. I mean, at some point, whether you've seen anything in battle or you're a civilian and you've gone through shit, at some point it's going to come up. And when it does, it's a matter of how you can do it. Now, you took an accounting course as like prerequisite for whatever course you were going through?
It was an elective because basically when you're taking like criminal justice, for example, or most degrees, you can basically take a couple whatever classes you want and it just counts as towards your degree. So that's what I did. I was like, well, I've always liked math. I've always been pretty decent at it, so I figured I'd take a shot at it. That's where it fell into, and then eventually I took an individual taxation class, and then that's where it just kicked off. The stuff that most people fall asleep to, I'm sitting there like, damn, this is really good stuff.
Yeah. So traditionally, if you look at like the Marine Corps and the Army, right? Not even bust and chop. Marine Corps probably has some of the lower IQs of all the other branches. I think we have the lowest like ASVAB score to get in. Dude, we're knuckle draggers. I get it. Sure. But the Army's like, a half a step above, if anything, as far as like overall IQ. So were you like this math guy in high school or?
It's funny you say. In high school, I knew math. I was good at it, but at the time, I felt like I had better things to do, like hanging out, driving around. It's funny enough because so I was supposed to graduate in 2007, right? So that's my graduation year. Well, there's two classes that I mentioned. I thought, I had better things to do at the time, so I didn't go. It was American Government and Brit Lit. Since I didn't go to them, I didn't pass them. Well, during that summer, before I went to the Army, I did correspondence courses. So that way I could get my degree, so I can just be done with it. And I finished those. They were packets like this thick, and I just read through them and got it done in like a week. I was like, wow, that was a waste of time if I'd have went to school. But anyway, so I send those in. I get my degree. Everything's good to go. There's no problem. I'm, high school diploma. But when I apply to go to UT, interestingly enough, they say, hey, we need your high school transcripts. All right, cool. It's been like 6-7 years. I don't have them. Let me call up Southie, which is my school. So I called them up and said, hey, I graduated in 2007. I'm getting ready to go to college. I'm getting ready to get out of the Army, so I need my transcripts. I'm like, all right, cool. So what's your name? So I give them my name. They're looking up like, we don't have your transcripts. What do you mean you don't have my transcripts? I went to this school. No, it shows you never graduated.
So wait, you actually got into the freaking Army with never actually, graduating high school.
Now this is the technicality portion of it. Technically, yes. Now here's so I'm like, all right, well, how do you meet? And that was my question to them. Was like, I joined the Army and they supposed to do like this whole background check.
Right.
I'm like, so how the hell did I get in if I never technically graduated high school? And they're like, we're not really sure, but you still need to finish these two classes. I'm like, well, I'm not coming back to fucking school.
Right. Well, you know how you did it, right? You had a recruiter that was desperate to get a number.
Oh, yeah.
He stuffed some paperwork.
Yeah, he probably showed that I had like a PhD or something.
Right.
But anyway, so I told him, I was like, yeah, I did these correspondence courses. I explained the situation. Like, all right, great. So who's your counselor? And I told him my counselor. I'm like, oh, yeah, she retired years ago. I'm like, what? I'm like, well, how are we going to figure this out? So they're like, okay, well, we got to go back into paper files because we only started using electronic files for everything like 2 years ago. So I was like, all right, whatever. And a week later, they finally called like, oh, yeah, we found your packets. I'm like, I can't believe you guys held on to those things.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I was like, all right, cool. So like, yeah, we'll just change this up in the records. I'm like, oh, well, thank you.
So for everybody who needs a high school degree, just call up your high school and tell them you graduated before they started computer records,
Yeah, right.
Right. Don't do
Amazing. So, that really blew my mind when that came up when I was trying to go to college. And get those transcripts to find out that technically I was a high school dropout.
Well, you know, what's interesting with it is you hear about all the guys like during the Vietnam area that went in at 16, 17, you know, they falsified records and everything.
Oh, yeah.
I've never heard anybody who able to get into the military without a high school quote unquote degree. I mean, technically you had one, but at least when things were entered into computer systems, it didn't show that, you know, you had one. That's interesting. Do you usually buck the system like that? No, I'm kidding.
That's why I got into taxes.
Right. You know, that's the kind of accountant I want is like for my company is somebody who just knows how to fib the numbers and work around the system. No.
Mm-hmm.
So you take a damn correspondence course, and somewhere along the line you go, oh, math's fun, said nobody ever, and you take another class, and that starts you down your path of I'm going to crunch numbers for the rest of my life.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that was kind of a simplified version of it. Very unglorified.
Look, I'm a Marine. We're going to keep it in simple terms so the rest of the jarheads listening to the show can understand it.
Right.
You know.
Well, what happened is after I take those courses, so this is, I don't know, a couple years after I got out now. I'm technically like a sophomore, junior-ish thing. I don't know, somewhere in between. And so I got a neighbor that lives across the street from me who owns a landscaping company. And we were decent friends. I mean, not like really great friends, but I told him, hey, I'll tell you what, why don't you give me $200? I'll do your books for you for this year. At the time, it was like July, because I knew that his books were all over the place, and I just got done learning how to do like the most basic of books. And I figured, well, with a company like his, he doesn't make like a ton of money. He's only one person. There's no employees, so this should be easy enough that I can handle it. Turns out I did a really good job because as I was going through the different courses and learning new material, I'm like, wow, I'm already doing this, I'm doing that, I'm applying it. I'm like, man, I really like this. This is nice being able to keep all these numbers and know things that are going on with the business. You can actually kind of forecast and see what's going to happen with the company as things are going with certain seasonal trends. So I'm like, I really like this. So then I have another guy that I used to work with that owned a charter boat business up in Michigan. And I told him, hey, I'll tell you what, why don't you give me like $300 or $400 and I'll do your books. So, all right, cool. So I did that, and the same thing worked out really well. He didn't have any employees, so I figured this is going to be simple enough. I got 2 sets of books, so now technically I got 2 clients. I'm like, this is pretty nice. So I really liked it. And
wait, you have 2 separate books, one for each company.
Yeah.
You were not keeping 2 books for one company.
No.
I was just making sure. You're like, now I got 2 books. I'm like, wait, can you get away with that? No.
Yeah, we had a job fair come to the school. You know, they always do it usually about once or twice a year. They'll come out with all like the really big corporate companies and stuff like that, try and find people and stuff. And I'm like, all right, I know that I'm not going to be able to do an internship, and it's because at the time I'm like 27. I've got a kid coming on the way. I'm married. I can't quit my full-time job that has full benefits and everything because I'm kind of the breadwinner anyway for the household. I can't drop and do an internship for a job that may not hire me. Now, the internships do pay, and they pay pretty good for accountants. The only problem is that, you know, there might be 30 interns for one CPA firm. They're going to hire 1 or 2 of them, maybe. And they don't even have to hire them. So you're not guaranteed. So that means I have to quit my job, lose all my benefits. I can't do that. So I decided I'm going to actually start and label my own company. And that's when I decided to become BMC Accounting LLC when I had those 2 clients, the landscaping, the charter boat tour. And then I go to that job fair. I'm like, all right, cool. You know, I've got business cards. I got resumes, got everything done up. And I go over there and I start talking to all these people, all these different firms. And one firm in particular really liked me. And they're like, oh, you know, this sounds great. What year are you in? I'm telling them about myself. And they're like, okay, well, typically we try to get people that are going to graduate, you know, like within the next semester. But I'll tell you what, why don't you give us your resume and your business card and we'll call you. And I was like, all right, great. So they called me actually like a week later. This is the largest CPA firm in all of Northwest Ohio. So that was kind of a big deal.
Oh, so I mean, there was like a total of 5 people working there? I mean, it's
what's that? Yeah.
So, I mean, it's Ohio.
Right. See, I don't live in the Amish here. Toledo's a nice city now. You go around a little outside, there's quite a bit of Amish out there that way.
Dude, I can't help but think of Toledo. Every time I hear Toledo, I think of Klinger from MASH.
Yeah, that's where everybody knows it. Yep.
All right. Go ahead. So this company calls you a week later.
Yep. So they called me up and they're like, hey, we'd like to do an interview. Why don't you come over to, our company on this day and this time? So, all right, awesome, sweet. So I'm already, I'm only a junior at this time, getting interviewed by a nice CPA firm, like a really, really big one too. So this is going to be good. So I go there, I do the interview with the HR person first. So I talk to them. She seems to be really intrigued and happy with what she sees. So I go on and I talk to all the different partners. So these are the people that own the company. There's 4 of them. So I talked to all 4 of them, and they all seem really excited to talk to me. Seem like everything I'm saying, they're kind of eating up. I'm like, man, this is really good. This is going to go well. And then they're like, all right, so we're going to go do lunch right now. So they take me out to this like nice 5-star restaurant, wine and dine me basically for an interview, which is not really uncommon in professional business services like accounting or law or anything like that. It's pretty typical because they want to see if they take you out, how you're going to act when you're at a meal if you were to be hired by them and you took a client out there. So they want to see, make sure this guy, doesn't eat mashed potatoes with his hands or something.
I mean, you were in the Army. There's a chance. I get it.
Right, yeah. I mean, if I was Air Force, I probably wouldn't have had to really chew for myself. But so, I mean, the whole experience was amazing. I'm like, man, this is really, really, this is really cool. And like, all right, everything went well, took off, and they said, all right, well, we'll call you within the next week. So, all right, sweet. So I figured, because they mentioned like, yeah, we know you're not going to be able to actually work as a CPA until you get out of school, but what we'll do is we'll hire you and we'll have you come in and do some temp work in the interim time, like part-time. I was like, oh, man, that's fucking perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And then 3 weeks goes by, and I don't hear nothing. Shit. So this isn't going well. And I get an email that's just like, hey, we got to inform you that we have chosen a different person. And it was like basically like a 3-sentence thing. I'm like, what the hell? Well, I thought this was going really well. So I didn't end up getting into that firm at all. And actually about that time that happened, there was another job fair at UT, and I saw them. I talked to them. They're like, yeah, well, unfortunately, we just decided not to go with you. They didn't really give me much to go off of to really understand what the issue was. So I'm like, all right, fine. And
well, legally, they really can't.
Yeah.
But it should have been nice. At least you know what to work on.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't really much for me to understand about. I was like, all right, fine, whatever. So it kind of sucks to go throughout this whole thing thinking you got something and then you don't. And this is probably August or September in the year. I don't remember what year, but it was near the fall. So I'm like, all right, man, tax season's coming up. I'm going to become, I'm going to start doing taxes too instead of just bookkeeping. Because I had already done my individual taxation course at this time. And I was pretty beat up about not getting hired into something like that. So I was like, all right, well, here's my goal. I'm going to do as good as I can with this on my own to be able to show prospective employers that I can do this on my own, learn everything on my own, and be able to get clients on my own, which is kind of a big thing for if you're going to go into a company, you go, hey, and I've been doing this for years on my own. I can walk in and you guys can show me how you guys want things done, and I'll do it that way. Well, unfortunately, that's not how it goes. I had another job fair after the first tax season, and I started talking to people, and I thought maybe I'll just throw out the fact that I'm a vet, see if maybe that'll help. That actually made things worse. Yeah, because the first time I never told anybody that I was a vet. The second time on the job fair, I was like, hey, I started touring Afghanistan real quick, like 2-minute spiel maybe on, like I said, I don't like to touch on it too much. And that's exactly why, because that's what happened. I told them, I was in the Army, and they're like, yeah, they pretty much couldn't hand me my resume back quick enough.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that, and I tell people all the time, when my first stunt into corporate America, really big corporate America, my vice president pulled me aside and he said 2 things. 1, never tell anybody you're a veteran, and lose the twang. You can't say y'all in corporate America. Yeah. And he wasn't wrong. He wasn't being a jerk or an ass about it. He's just being a veteran in corporate America means nothing.
No.
And most times it means unhireable, which is unfortunate.
I think the stigma behind it is a lot of times people will relate military to not highly intelligent, especially when you're going into like a professional service like accounting or law or medicine. You don't want not intelligent tagged on you.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a dose of crazy thrown in there too. Not PTSD crazy. It's just you're typically more outspoken, and corporate America wants, follow the rule people, right?
Right.
And in the military, we always just seem to get the job done. It may not always be the perfect, proper A to B, but the job gets done. It gets taken care of. And then that's, I think, the other thing that hinders a lot of veterans getting into more of a corporate game and a corporate world. So
right.
Now you're walking around. Nobody wants to hire the veteran.
Yep. And yeah, it sucks. So I was at this job fair. It started at like 10 o'clock in the morning. This was like 10:12, and I was like, yeah, I'm done. Because I had talked to like 6 of them already. I was like, I'm done with this. I'm not coming back to these no more. So I am going full hard charge on my business. My business is going to be the way to go. It's going to be number one in the area. And it's funny because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what I want to do is in 20 years, I want to be able to buy a partnership share of the company that turned me down just to be that good.
Right.
So, that's what I had in mind. So I said, all right, great. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish out my accounting, did my corporate taxation class, aced that, killed it. And then so every day since then, I pretty much have had my nose in IRS publications, treasury regulations, all sorts of really terribly boring stuff for most people. But when you're the tax accountant and you're doing tax, preparing taxes for people, that's the guy you want. So that's what I've been doing pretty much every day. And I've been connecting with business owners, whether it's on these different veteran entrepreneur groups on Facebook, or when I see people out, and I'm out too, I hand out business cards, I talk to people. The first year alone, when I was just doing individual and like schedules, it's called Schedule C filers. Those are like the people that own single member LLCs and sole proprietors. I did about almost 100 clients, which is about 300 tax returns for that first year. And I'm hoping to push over about 400 or 500 clients this year on my own.
So people, to me, I think, don't watch enough movies, and here's why I say that. Last thing you want to do is piss off the wrong person, because you get pissed off the wrong person, and they're going to look at you and say, hold my beer and watch this, because I'm about to blow some things up. And it sounds like that's what you're doing, is building a corporate tax empire. And I say that smart-assedly, but it's a really cool thing. And I know you said one of your goals is to literally go buy a chunk of, one of these other companies. Wouldn't it be more fun just to go really big and put their ass out of business?
It would be. It's funny because, that's without the, in the back of my head, that's what I really want to do, is be able to put them down and be like, I own 50% of a partnership that I was never a part of to start with, just so I can be like, and you guys don't, all your clients are now mine. Thank you.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. So pretty crazy ride. I mean, when you first got out of the Army and you're hitting the civilian, side of things, did that whole thought, even as a kid, at no point did you want, I think, raise your hand and say, I'm going to be an accountant for the rest of my life? No,
I never really thought that. I always thought cop. Ever since I think I have my mom probably has a little video of me when I was a year and a half playing with cop stuff all the time, like cop cars and sirens and handcuffs. That was what I wanted to do my whole life. And it really was. And I still really like that career, but it's not something I'm ever going to find myself into anymore now.
Is that why you went into the MPs when you were in the Army?
Yep. That was exactly why I went in. I figured, I'll go be an MP. I get a bunch of experience, go deploy, get out, go be a police officer in Ohio. In fact, actually, when I first got out, while I was still going to school for criminal justice, I actually went through the hiring process for the State Highway Patrol in Ohio, and I got all the way past the polygraph. And I guess, they said I failed the polygraph. I don't remember lying, but
yeah. Well, and it's funny is criminal services degree. I mean, I've got basically a little brother that has one of those, and the only thing you can do with the criminal services degree is be a cop. I mean, that's it. No matter whatever BS they try and feed you, that's the only thing that's good for. So now he's a sales guy, which is your other alternative, because he fully got the criminal services degree, and it's a piece of paper.
It doesn't do anything. In fact, most police departments don't want it, which makes it, to me, I don't know. I never understood it, because it's like, all right, you want to go be a nurse? We'll go to nursing school, right? Well, why would you want a nurse to have a degree in history? How is that going to help you?
Yeah, but the cop with a criminal, degree, they don't want straight laced by the books. You've got to have street smarts to make it as a cop. I mean,
I agree with you.
Dude,
it's just so interesting because I always thought, like, why would they not at least want that, or at least think that that's a decent degree? I don't know. I never understood it, but that's why initially I called it a really cool liberal arts degree, is because that's exactly.
It's funny is the top sales guys that I've had work for me or I've trained, didn't have degrees at all. Degree is nothing more than ink on paper. Now, I mean, there's certain professions that you absolutely want those guys. If my doctor's operating on me, I want him to have some sort of degree. If a lawyer's defending me or whatever else, I want some sort of degree. If my taxes are being looked at, I want some sort of degree. But I can't think of a whole lot of reasons you really need a degree. I mean, if you get a business degree, you're not going to learn anything in business school.
No, and that's the thing, and that's what I noticed when going through this, starting my own business and actually becoming a real business, not just some side hustle, is that the stuff you learn in business school doesn't mean that you're going to become successful. You have to be able to actually apply all those things on your very own and interpret every single situation on your own to do that if you were going to go into business.
Right.
Now, just because you have a business degree doesn't mean you're going to be a great sales manager or district manager or anything like that. It doesn't do you any good for those degrees. That's not what they're meant for, and you're right by that. I mean, if you just think that because you have a degree it's worth something, it's not. And one of my favorite things I like to tell people, too, and it always cracks me up, is like, what do you call the guy in med school that got D's?
Doctor. Yeah, exactly right. What gets me is all these kids who, unfortunately, mom and dad said you're going to college, right? Mm-hmm. No matter what, you're going to college. You're now getting out of college $200,000 to $300,000 in debt or whatever else. Yeah. Now going to get a job between $50,000 and $70,000 a year, and they're so covered up in student loan debt and everything else that they don't know how to unbury themselves, and it's going to take 10 to 20 years to figure it out, when in truth they could have taken those same 4 years and started climbing a corporate ladder and learned through the school of hard knocks and really figured it out.
Yeah. And right now what's really cool too is because the market is so saturated for college students, which is why we're having such an issue with the student loan debt, is because so many people went to freaking college and have so many loans out that there's actually a gap in the market for trades and vocationals like HVAC, for example. Those people that work in HVAC right now make a shit ton of money.
Yep.
And those are people that are like on their apprenticeships, they'll make good money. They make like $30-something an hour while they're learning to do their job.
Right.
You're not going to get that doing anything else, really.
No.
So, and you don't need you don't go to get a 4-year degree for that.
Right.
So, right. Yeah. Just a 4-year degree doesn't necessarily mean that's the right path for it.
Well, I mean, just to prove your point, when I got out of the Marine Corps, my first job was an HVAC guy. My best friend and his dad had a HVAC company, and it was a dirty job. I was climbing under houses and up in attics, but we made. As a 22-year-old kid, I was making $1,000 a week, and I mean, solid freaking money at that age. And for some people,
1920, right?
Yeah, I was 22.
No, I said that was in 1920, right?
Oh, 1920. Kiss my ass. It's just interesting. I love listening to guys like Mike Rowe and them that are like, dude, we need more trades. We need more people on the street doing the real work. Quit chasing the corporate dream that you're going to be miserable at. Because when you growing up, this was my experience. I thought success looked like the corporate buildings, the suits, the nice cars, the fancy setup. Were you the same way growing up?
A little different, because my dad actually owned his own business. He owned an excavating business, and he was in the Air Force, and that was what he did. Was he was a earth mover. He had, he worked with all the bulldozers, excavators, and everything like that. So when he got out, he started his own business, and it was pretty successful until the housing crash in 2007. He went under, along with about 90% of the other market out there. So I always thought if you owned a business, that was going to be your version of being successful, especially if it was something that was what you did. You didn't do another job with that too. Like if you were able to just live off of decently your own business, that was successful for me. Right.
Interesting. Well, you're running a successful practice, working with small and medium-sized businesses and helping them get all their stuff taken care of. Where is all this taking you? I mean, I know the 1M.
Right. So really what I'm wanting to do this year is going to be interesting because this is the first year I went national. So last year, like I mentioned, I was just local. I drove to people's houses and did Texas, met them up at Starbucks, Panera, wherever, because I didn't have an office. And this year I'm doing national, so I have people in California, Alaska, Florida, Texas, wherever. Eventually I'd like to set up, and it's going to be interesting because it's going to be kind of one of its own. It's not going to be anything like it where you call. It's almost like a mobile H&R Block, someone that's, like a call center. You talk to people, we're Skyping, we're doing things just like that, full of people that are enrolled agents and CPAs that are professionals to do your taxes and your books and everything like that. So they're kind of like your business solution. That's kind of the large scale idea of what I'm looking to do, 5 or 10 years down the road. I've got to build up enough capital first to be able to get down to that part where I can hire people and do it. Because eventually, it's just like the way H&R Block started. The guys that started that, they didn't start filing taxes after a couple of years. They ran a business. So that's the same thing for me. I'm not always going to actually be preparing taxes, but I'm going to own this business. And that's the goal, is to have, employees that have a national reach and hopefully take over as many companies as I can.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, man, what a cool ride and a cool journey. I know every business owner that jumps out on their own and they throw everything into, this is going to be my thing, this is going to be my ride. It always goes smooth as hell, perfect, no mistakes, no screw-ups. Everything is just sunshine and rainbows. What are some of your big screw-ups?
Sure. Yeah. So, okay. I mean, I've had a couple good ones too, especially starting off when, because like I said, I was doing this while I was in school. So when I was doing taxes, it was actually for a good friend of mine too. We were itemizing his deductions, and I was going through his receipts and doing everything like that, adding it up. And something simple as I just didn't move a paper clip over, so I didn't see the extra $1,000 of deduction for him. So that cost him like $300, but I ended up fixing it and getting his money back. But that was like one of my first instances of mistake. I was like, man, thank God it was one of my friends and it wasn't somebody, that I didn't know. It could totally ruin it up. They write bad on Facebook. But probably the biggest lesson I've learned most recently, too, that I've had a huge problem with is I was actually my best client to start with because they were always paying me on time. It was my biggest ticket client. I'm talking, $1,000 a week probably. I'm making money off of this guy. So that's really nice. The only problem is when we first started, I kept trying to get this guy to sign a contract, and he was just like, I'm out of state, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm not going to give this guy a big problem because he's paying me on time. Every time I send him an invoice, no problem. And then a couple of weeks ago, he decided that he was not going to pay me. And so I emailed him back. I was like, what the hell's going on? You never missed an invoice before. You all right? He's like, yeah, I don't really remember ever signing a contract for you.
Wow. So good lesson learned. I mean, I love people when they share the stories because right now entrepreneurs is the craziest buzzword on the face of the earth, right? I mean, there's so many people out there saying start your own business, run your own business. I tell everybody it's the new multi-level marketing, right? Mm-hmm. It's the you can start this and be a millionaire overnight thing. But I love sharing the raw side of it because, that's where all the lessons come from of people getting punched in the face as they continue to move through, their journey and figuring out and learn from it. So I bet you have a lot of different style of contracts in place now.
I do. Yeah, ever since, and I've always had people sign contracts, and that was just the only time that had not happened, and I just never expected it because, you have one client that's doing really well. He pays you. He's somewhat friendly. You figure, this guy's not going to screw me. No, they're going to screw you.
Yeah.
No, they'll screw you.
Yep. And unfortunately, that's business. That's business. Well, brother, thanks for coming on and sharing your journey and stories with us. Any, huge tax tips you want to leave or give people? I mean, how can I write off another 40,000 miles on my car every year would be awesome, since that's usually my highest write-off.
Man, any individual tax thing, it's kind of hard to talk about. I guess the biggest thing is now that there's it's called Section 199A. It's a 20% of qualified business income is automatically just written off the top for flow-through entities. So if you own like a sole proprietor, an LLC, a partnership, or an S corporation, if you made $100,000 for the year on your shareholder side or on your partner side, when it flows through down to you, you write off 20% of that, depending on how much you have for income for the year. So it does have limitations, but like for married filing joint, if you have under $315,000 of income for the year, 20% of your business income is deducted. So
that's a big deduction.
Yeah, it is.
So nice. Well, there you go. Well, brother, here's how I like to wrap up the show, and I do stump some people with this, so be forewarned.
Okay.
If you were going to leave my audience at Champions some sort of motivational quote, saying, phrase, thought, mantra, something they can take with them on their journey, especially when they're going through maybe the tough times of their trip, what would be that quote or phrase you would say? Remember this.
Be your best supporter, because no matter who you have next to your side, they're not always going to support you. So you've got to be able to bring it on your own.
That's awesome, brother. Thanks for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate having you here.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I appreciate the opportunity, man. It's cool to talk about this.
Thanks for listening to Donnie Success Champions podcast. If you'd like to hear more about our current guest today, or if you'd like to hear stories from our other guests on the show, come hang out with us on our website at successchampspodcast.com. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you need to reach out to me for any reason, you can catch me at Donnie@DonnieBoivin.com.